And he prayed and said, Lord, you're not going to destroy the righteous, are you? Supposing there are just 50, won't you spare the city? And the Lord said, verse 26, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous, I'll spare the whole place. And Abraham said, now Lord, I venture to speak, and I am but dust and ashes. Think of his attitude. Think of what he thinks of himself before God. What he thought of himself before other men was that he was just a servant. And what he thinks of himself in relation to God is that he's just dust and ashes. And he said, supposing there are only 45. And the Lord said, all right, I won't destroy the 45. Then he said, supposing there are only 40. He said, I won't destroy it. He said, oh Lord, verse 30, don't be angry, supposing there are only 30. He said, I won't destroy it if there are 30. Then he said, supposing there are only 20. Verse 31. He said, I won't destroy it if there are 20. Then he said, I'll ask once more, supposing there are only 10. Because Abraham knew it was a wicked place. Possible that there may not even be 20 righteous people. He says that there must be at least 10. And what type of city is it if there are not even 10 righteous people there? And I think he had the feeling that will be spared. Because surely there must be 10 righteous people in all those thousands. And he said, if I find 10 righteous people, not 10,000 compromisers, no, 10 upright, righteous people could save a whole city from destruction, from the judgment of God. Do we learn something there? Do we learn the tremendous power that righteousness has to bless a city? 10 people can protect a whole city from God's judgment. It's a tremendous challenge. But He's not impressed by compromisers. He's not impressed by those who are hypocrites. 10 righteous people. Do you think God can find 10 righteous people in Bangalore? Like Abraham, we may say, oh, sure. Yeah, I would have a question mark on that. Absolutely upright and righteous and God-fearing by the new covenant standards. I hope God can find 10 righteous people in the city. I think this city would be tremendously influenced if He could find 10 people who lived in absolute integrity before His face. Multitudes of compromisers may know the doctrine, but 10 righteous people will influence a city for good, and even a nation. But not if they are not righteous. You know that word in James chapter 5 which says, James 5 and verse 16, the last part, the effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. Not the effective prayer of any believer. No, some believers are not righteous. But the effective prayer of a righteous man, one man praying can accomplish a fantastic amount if he's righteous. That's why I'm not impressed when I see a notice saying 5,000 people are going to gather for an all-night prayer meeting in a particular hall. I said, that's fine, they can go ahead and have their all-night prayer meeting. If they think that God's going to hear them because there are 5,000, they don't have a clue about God's ways. See, men are impressed by numbers. If 1 million people protest against something, even the government will change its policy on a matter, as we have seen in our country again and again, because so many people are protesting against it. Numbers impress men, but God's not impressed. Even if 1 million come to a prayer meeting, one righteous man praying can accomplish such a lot. And he takes the example of Elijah in verse 17, who prayed and it didn't rain, and he prayed again and it rained. How many people there were in Israel? Do you know that God told Elijah at that time that there are 7,000 people in this country who have not bowed down to idols? All the others have bowed down to idols, but there are 7,000 people in Israel who had not bowed down to idols. They had kept themselves pure from that. But they were not righteous like Elijah. That one man could do more than all those 7,000 believers. We can say the rest of Israel were unbelievers. These 7,000 were believers. But among these 7,000 there was one man, Elijah, who was absolutely righteous. He could open and close heaven. The others were just drifting along. Of course, they didn't bow down to idols. They were not as bad as the rest of the Israelites. And so we find there were three categories in Israel. There was the Elijah, there were the 7,000, and the rest. And it's the same with Christendom today. There's the occasional Elijah. There's the multitudes of those who they don't bow down to idols. They don't cheat anyone. But they're not absolutely righteous. They don't live before God's face. Their private life and hidden life and secret life is not upright. That is a rare Elijah that you find there. This is the multitudes of people who have a good testimony before men. They're not like all the other unbelievers who are bowing down to idols. But all those 7,000, think if those 7,000 people had a prayer meeting, all-night prayer meeting for fire from heaven, do you think the fire would have come? No. But one man prayed for 2 minutes and the fire came. Not even 2 minutes, a few seconds. And the fire came. What does it prove to us? It's not numbers. It's not all-night prayer. It's a question of righteousness in the life. And that man needs to pray just a few seconds. And the fire falls. If we can learn a lesson from this, the ears of the Lord, it says, are always open to the righteous. It's like a telephone. We can use the illustration of the telephone that when a man prays, the Lord can pick up the phone, but the Lord knows who's praying. Is it a righteous man? He picks up the phone immediately. Is it a man who's not righteous in his private life? The Lord doesn't even pick up the telephone. It just rings. Of course, the man can keep on speaking at the other end, like some people can do, like children dial some number and nobody's picked it up, they keep on speaking. A lot of all-night prayer meetings are like that. They keep on speaking. Nobody's listening at the other end. It's child's play. Waste of time. We can learn something from Abraham in this area. 2 seconds. Pick up a telephone and say something and there's action. And the other child is speaking into the telephone for 2-3 hours and nothing's happening. Are we impressed when we hear that somebody spent 3 hours in prayer? It is to the righteous that the ears of the Lord are always open. Be righteous and upright, brothers, sisters, if you want to make an impact with your life in the world, in our one short life. Be upright and live before God's face. Don't live before the face of men, as we have often said. Live before God's face and only fear God. And your one life can make a tremendous impact for God. However weak or ungifted or whatever weakness and limitation you may have, if you're upright and you live before God's face, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, cleanse yourself from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, and God sees your wholeheartedness in that area. You pick up the telephone saying, Lord, it's me, and He picks up 5 seconds. I've just got to say something, and there's action. Think to be able to be on such terms with God? Jesus was like that. He could say, I thank God, thank you, Father, that you always hear me. There was never another person like Him. But we can strive towards it and get nearer and nearer and nearer to that. Yeah? So we see here in Genesis 18 that 10 people could have saved that city, but there were not 10 righteous people. There must have been a lot of religious people in Sodom, but there were not 10 righteous people. And as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, Genesis 18:33, and Abraham returned to his place.